All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL props video. Going to be showing you guys how to use the 9to5 NFL prop tools to give yourself an advantage over the sports books. Now, we do have two different types of sports books. I'll be referring to them as the DFS sports books and then the traditional sports books. So the DFS sports books are going to be more of PrizePicks, Underdog, kind of Fliff as well, but that's more of a traditional sports book. The traditional sports books, obviously, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, those ones, ESPN Bet, Hard Rock Bet. And I have two different kind of tools available for those two different sportsbook sets that we have. So I want to start out with the DFS sites, PrizePicks and Underdog. So first, just real quickly, we'll talk about kind of navigation to this page. So for the props, you could go to the PrizePicks or Underdog cheat sheet for the DFS sites. Then we also have a specific cheat sheet for DraftKings and a specific cheat sheet for Fliff. If not, if you're just looking for the general NFL prop bets, you would go to NFL cheat sheet. But let's start out with the PrizePicks cheat sheet here. And so if you are someone that maybe doesn't know how to go about properly beating PrizePicks or Underdog in a long-term solution, I do have it laid out for you guys directly on this page. If you ever hear me refer to a bet being a good bet, that's typically because it has a 54% edge or greater, or likelihood to hit, however you want to phrase it. And the way that this is determined is by taking the average sportsbook line from several different sportsbooks that you guys will see later on in this video. We compare that average line, their over and under for that line without juice associated to the line, because we need to get the true odds for that line, and comparing it against the PrizePicks or Underdog bet. And so you guys will see here, again, these are kind of typically why I will favor a 5-slip bet or a 6-slip bet, because in order to gain long-term edge over PrizePicks or Underdog, you only need a bet that has a 54% likelihood to hit or so. Whereas if you're doing 2-slip bets, 3-slip bets, 4-slip bets, that number goes up. Now, it does change when you have discounted props that PrizePicks or Underdog gives us, or free square. Then I typically tell people, just find the best bet available on the board that day and use that with the discounted prop or free square. This is also shown right here, win rate based off of a 6-slip bet, and kind of how that 54% calculation goes into that. And so I'm doing this video on Tuesday, guys. We're not getting that many prop bets just yet in general. We can see that the top prop bet on the board right now is going to be Brandon Ayuk for over 4.5 receptions. Now, in this cheat sheet, you'll notice that we have a projection line in there. The projection data, some people probably get a little bit confused by sometimes. That's not really important in terms of gaining a long-term edge on PrizePicks or Underdog. That's more of a secondary resource for everyone to use and to look at, because sometimes there are lines that pop up that maybe I personally don't agree with. And if the projection data disagrees with kind of what Vegas is seeing, that might be a prop bet that I personally choose to stay away from. But yes, let's just kind of talk about reading this first prop bet. So we got Brandon Ayuk, San Francisco versus Seattle. They play at it's Eastern time, 8:15 Eastern. We look at the game total. It's a 74.5 game total, with the over favored by, on average, about 109. The spread is the Niners are favored to win by 3.5 points. It's slightly more likely for that to go over as well. The prop that we're looking at right now is going to be this receptions prop, and the 9to5 tag, which is the bet that you would make based off of how Vegas views it, is going to be to bet the over. And so we can see the over line here is minus 130. So again, adjusting for no juice associated, that has a 53.2% likelihood on average per the average sportsbook line for him to get over 4.5 receptions. So the under then is 11.23. Now, on a typical sportsbook, a line will never fall between or lower than 100, whether that be plus 100 or minus 100. It's never going to fall lower than that. So this is kind of already telling me that maybe some books are giving us slightly different lines, but oh well, that doesn't really matter. We're getting the general sense of what this line is telling us. And so we see the sportsbook line. That's the average sportsbook line pulled in from all the various sportsbooks. And then we're seeing right now that Underdog, and I like to compare Underdog and PrizePicks against each other. They're the two most popular in the space of DFS props. So it's nice to be able to gauge using that. Maybe one of them is actually the outlier, which we'll see right here with Zach Ertz. So for example, Zach Ertz, the projection data likes him to get 32.6 receiving yards. The average sportsbook line has that 27.5, where they're basically giving him a 50-50 chance. So yeah, naturally the PrizePicks line being 3 over both Underdog and the sportsbook line, that's a clear outlier there. And so one of those two are pretty wrong, because 3 is a big prop line difference. And that's what you'll see. Your prop line difference, the PrizePicks line minus the sportsbook line, is what that is showing us. And the edge is going to be the calculation of which the bet is likely to hit. So guys, because it's Tuesday, again, we're not getting that many great prop bets as it sits right now in terms of getting the edge, a clear edge over PrizePicks or Underdog, kind of in that long term. So I'm taking a screenshot from week 5's bets. I'm recording this on week 6 of the NFL season. And what we're going to notice is that last week we had several really good bets. And the bets that I personally really like are kind of these reception bets. I feel like those are the easiest to project for Vegas. It's not like a yards prop where, yes, there's penalties that can play a role, but for the most part, like it's going to be targets lead to receptions. Receptions obviously are just kind of based on game flow and everything. You can kind of just basically tell whether or not it's going to hit. So last week we had these two prop bets, Colby Parkinson and Tutu Atwell. We can see Colby Parkinson was at 3.5 receptions. Tutu Atwell was at 3.5 receptions as well. Now, this is one where the projection data didn't really like the over for either of them. Again, that's why it's more of a secondary data point. Now, had I agreed with the projection line, I might have maybe decided not to do these, but these are a 55% edge likelihood to hit. And this is based off the average sportsbook lines that we are getting. And so because of that, these were two bets that we just simply had to make, especially nowadays on PrizePicks or Underdog, where they're so quick to bump up the lines. For PrizePicks, they're giving them as a goblin prop bet typically, where they'll say it's a 4 for the line instead. For an example here, we see that Underdog with Matt Gay's kicking points, they did that because they're losing out on that line because it's not a good line. And so PrizePicks still having at 6.5, it was not a good line for them. So I'm assuming PrizePicks ended up bumping that line. And so these are two clear examples of great bets that we had. And so here's kind of just the results from that. Obviously, very nice. This was a game that I personally really liked. I really like these bets. I went pretty in on those, especially when they're popping up. Tutu went and had 6 receptions. Colby Parkinson had 7. And so we'll bring up that screenshot again. And what we'll notice is that we had another good prop bet in there, George Kittle, to get over his fantasy score. Now, this is one that I want to call it. Fantasy score is a little bit different in terms of the calculation. It's a combination stat. So we're looking at the likelihood for a receiver. It'd be the likelihood really for them to get their over receptions and their over receiving yards. Also attached to that is going to be an anytime touchdown. Now, yes, some receivers, in this case the tight end, some will have a little bit of rushing props associated with them. It is taken in all of that, but obviously for a tight end, for a receiver, we're not going to get passing yards or anything like that. So, but that all goes into it. So it's a little bit different than your normal prop bet. And that typically results in us getting the biggest edge is with fantasy score. Sometimes it comes down to the likelihood of an anytime touchdown, really how PrizePicks is valuing that compared to a traditional sports book. But this is typically where we get our biggest edges. And so Garrett Wilson was the exact same thing as George Kittle, where one, we can see that's going to be a slightly better bet on PrizePicks compared to Underdog because of Underdog. Underdog does it with a 0.5 PPR, the traditional scoring. So if you're looking at the PrizePicks cheat sheet, we are making a calculation adjustment in there for PrizePicks scoring and vice versa for Underdog scoring. Now, I do want to call out one thing in regards to fantasy score and how it is also calculated. A lot of the times players will not be likely to score a touchdown. If it's very not likely for a player to score a touchdown, that line is not associated with the average sportsbook line for the over or under. You will not see that percent likelihood shown in there. Okay, so in this area right here. However, the percent likelihood for a player to score a touchdown will be reflected in the average sportsbook line because the average sportsbook line for someone to score a touchdown is 0.5. If you were to take 0.5 times 6 for a player that only has like a 10% likelihood to score a touchdown and you just did 0.5 times 6, that would drastically skew the data for the average sportsbook line. And then everything would be favoring the over, So we're taking that, like for that example that I just used, that 10%, and we're basically saying, all right, what would be 10% of a 0.5 line? And then including that in the sportsbook line calculation. And I will say, guys, the nice thing about using this screenshot is the only bet that missed last week in this portion was Keenan Allen. So we had several of bets that had a 54% likelihood or better to hit, and they all hit minus the Keenan Allen line, which is obviously higher than a 54% likelihood to hit. That's going to happen. That is sports betting. That's worth calling out. Is that some days are going to be worse than the others. Some days Vegas is going to be more correct than PrizePicks or Underdog. That's just going to happen. In this situation, great. But that's also part of it. That's why we are chasing those lines that give us that long-term edge, a 54% likelihood or greater to hit. And so let's jump back into the lines that we have for Tuesday. Obviously, you can sort it by player, you can sort it by team, you can sort it by game, you can sort it by the prop that we have, game time. Does the data correlate? So if you want to click yes, that's going to then filter in only the prop bets where we have the average sportsbook line and we have the PrizePicks line and then the average line in general. So including that as the projection data. And I phrase it that way because you'll see here that with this one specifically, the projection data only has it set at like 4.4 for his receptions. But when we compare it against the average line, so it's going to be the average line agrees with what the PrizePicks line is saying and the average sportsbook line is saying compared to what the bet is saying. And so it's when all that data correlates together. Typically speaking, that will be the projection data, like all these other bets that we have here. Now, I do want to call it that when you do click on a certain prop bet as well, you can scroll down. And this is something that I'm working on. It should be cleaned up a little bit here. I'll probably I'll change this into an average projection and then the DVP projection. That'll be included down here as well. But it's just all the same information, just a little bit more laid out for you as above here. And then you can also sort it by goblin lines as well. Goblin lines are just going to straight up tell you what are the best goblin bets. So you go by type here. We'll take that off. Sorry. And then, so yeah, you got the goblin only lines. And then if you wanted to sort it by demon lines, what you would want to do is first, I would say take off really the anytime touchdowns here, the receptions and receiving touchdowns, or let's just move the edge slider up to really like 45%. And so basically this is doing the exact opposite of what the data would be telling us. Now for a demon, you're typically you're going to have to bet the over regardless. But looking at it, guys, it wouldn't be a 56.6% edge for the over to hit. It'd be almost a 44% edge for the over to hit. So typically you want to flip this around. If we can get some of these bets that are kind of like a 50-50 to hit, we'd want to use those. But guys, don't use demon prop bets or goblin prop bets. It's not going to be a long-term profitable approach for you. Now we'll jump on into Underdog. Underdog is going to operate basically the same way because Underdog data is a little bit better in terms of pulling in the game data, just how they have it broken down, how I'm able to pull it in. It is a little bit easier, I would say, to sort by game or to sort by team, just as an FY. But it's going to be all the same stuff that we have. For whatever reason, it does pull in the dates a little bit differently. I think it's based off of like when the game finishes or is projected to finish. I don't exactly know. So like if you click on Friday, that's actually gonna be the Thursday games. Again, I don't really control that. It's weird. That's something that if I can figure out on the back end how to switch that, I will. But this operates the exact same way as does the PrizePicks cheat sheet. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and jump on into the traditional sports books. All right, so now I'm going to be jumping into the NFL traditional player props. So like DraftKings, BetMGM, FanDuel, Hard Rock Bet, ESPN Bet, kind of all those. Going to be showing you guys that cheat sheet. And so this is going to operate the same way as the PrizePicks and Underdog cheat sheets in terms of the first functionality of how you're going to go about using this tool. There's kind of 3 different ways I would go about using this tool. We're going to start with the first one, and that's going to be sorting by the edge percent. And so this is going to be taking the average sportsbook line that we have here for a specific prop and then comparing it against that specific sportsbook's line that we have. So for this top one, it's going to be Jordan Mason. We got his receptions line is at 1.5 on ESPN Bet. So we can see that the average sportsbook line also has this line set at 1.5. They're giving him a 46.6% chance to get the over. They're giving him a 53.5% chance to get the under. Now, I do want to call it the average sportsbook line here will have the juice filtered out. So there are no juice in the average sportsbook lines, but there is going to be juice associated with the lines that are coming in for the specific sportsbook that we're measuring against. And so that's where if we are ever getting a positive edge here, a number greater than 1, or really a number greater than 0, that's a very big edge. That should not be happening. That tells us that that specific book has a bad line. And that will happen periodically throughout the week. I'm doing this video a little bit earlier on in the week. It's not really going to happen for like a 1-game slate or anything like that, but more so for, Sundays when there's a plethora of games going on. And so that's the starting point. Whenever we can gain an edge on a bet that way, that's pretty huge. And so in simple, guys, you can see here. So ESPN Bet is giving the under here a 54.6% chance to hit, whereas the average sportsbook line is giving it a 53.5% chance. So the edge is off by -1%. So nothing too crazy there, but that's just something to note. So that's the first way that we can instantly gain an edge on those specific sportsbooks. Now, I do want to call it that this edge percent that you're going to see here is going to be directly aligned with the bet tag that we have here. And I phrase that way because when we sort by projected edge, it's a little bit different. And so the projected edge does not associate with the bet tag. Just want to make that clear. The projected edge is going to be based off of the projection line that you see right here. So it's comparing the average sportsbook line against the sportsbook line still, but it's also taking into account the projection line as well. So Zach Charbonnet is projected to get 28.47 for his rushing yards. And so the line at 13.5 is a bad line. Now, thankfully right here, the data is also telling us to bet the over with the bet tag. But like we go to this bet here with him, and the bet tag is telling us to bet the under. Now, why is that? Well, because we look at this line here from ESPN Bet, they have the line set at 14.5, whereas the average sportsbook line is giving it about a 50-50 to get 13.64 rush yards. Okay, so that's why the bet tag is being displayed that way. I could add in another bet tag to this, which is something I did with the MLB cheat sheet here, but I felt like it was just more confusing for people. So I don't want to clutter this tab too much. But sorting by the projected edge is going to be another way in which we can go about attacking each slate. And again, it's going to be based off the projection line. The projection line is determined by several different things. One is going to be based off of the kind of original projections that I've developed. That's more of like DFS related projections that were separate from what Vegas was thinking, but it's also going to include what the Vegas line is thinking. It's also going to include a little bit of DVP as well. And so just as an FYI, when you sort by this column here, line minus average projection, that's going to be mostly taking whatever the average line that we're getting for that prop is. So right here against that sportsbook line, typically speaking, it's a measure against all the lines that we have coming in. So like DVP projection, average sportsbook line for each individual sportsbook. Like as an FY, like there's several different sportsbooks that go into each and every average sportsbook line that we have. And then the third way to go about using this is the way that I typically use it. It's mostly when I'm going through my research, I see a couple of bets that to me are kind of outliers, bets that I think we should be betting on. So I'm just going to do a random example here. I'm going to use Jauan Jennings for the Thursday night game. I personally, this isn't one that sticks out to me, but just for, an example to use. So let's say you think, or I think that Jauan Jennings is going to have a great game. Obviously, I would want to find the best bet possible then that I could use for, let's say, his over receptions here of 2.5 receptions. And so going through this, we would see that, all right, minus 105 for Jauan Jennings on Hard Rock Bet would probably be a good one. And then on BetMGM, that'd also be good at minus 105 because we're trying to get the best payout possible that we can for that specific bet. Now, I know not everyone has access to every single one of these books in their states. You can sort it by whichever sports book you want as well. I may or may not be adding in more into the sheet. Basically, I just wanted the most popular ones in there right now. And then if I add in more, I can. Guys, I have odds for like Australia, Europe, just several of other odds that are coming in as well that I could display here as well. But for now, we're going to keep it to the most popular sports books. One thing I do want to call it as well, let's say you want to look at this bet a little bit more. You can click on that player inside of there, and then scroll down to the bottom and you can get his averages, his projections, the DST stats. So the defense / special team. So defense stats. And then what Vegas is saying. So for this receptions one, we can go to here, this reception projection we can see is at 2.25. We can see the average receptions 4.4. We can see the Vegas reception line is at 2.5. And then the D receptions is 2.38. I want to talk about like the D stats as well. So that's going to be slightly different per player because we're comparing it against each player. So let's say we go into Brandon Ayuk and his receptions. Whenever I'll click on a random bet for Brandon Ayuk, we scroll down and his reception line for the defense is going to be slightly higher. Well, because he has a different role. We're doing the defensive stats based off the role. And the reason why that is because when you, let's say, when you compare a player like Juwan Jennings, who's only playing, 60% of the snaps, to someone like Brandon Ayuk, who's playing 90% of the stats, then yes, it's going to be slightly different in terms of what we should be expecting based off of the defense there. And then I just want to get into some curtain call things while we are here. So if you are someone that is using this tool on a mobile device, I did recently push an update on the website. Hopefully that alleviates some of the bouncing issues that people would have when they're zooming in, mostly on some iPhones. Like it would bounce the page sometime and it just like continue to refresh. Hopefully that alleviated that. If it didn't, there's kind of two ways you can go about using that. The easiest way is to go down to the bottom and just click on zoom in, zoom out. Very easy way to go about using that. That's just going to, obviously zoom in and zoom out on the data in here. Another thing you can do is switch the 9to5 website to a mobile desktop view, a mobile desktop site, and then that should alleviate as well. It should operate much more like you saw during this video. And then lastly, guys, I do want to call it that this data is updating about every 30 minutes throughout the day. A little bit of a buffer between like 2 and like 4 a.m. That's pretty much it. Or it's like, I think every hour then. But yes, this is continuously updating every 30 minutes, as well as the PrizePicks or Underdog tools. And then lastly here, guys, just want to talk about the DraftKings cheat sheet as well as the Fliff cheat sheet. So I do want to call it that if you cannot click into a certain like tool, that just means that tool hasn't been updated just yet. So right now for DraftKings, it's NFL and MLB that's currently available. This is going to operate the exact same way though. Eventually I want to get all the like best DraftKings prop bets importing into a cheat sheet just to make it faster and more simple for you guys to, view which bets you want. And then the Fliff cheat sheet is going to operate exactly the same as well as the DraftKings cheat sheet and as the previous cheat sheet that I just showed you guys, sort by edge or projected edge as well. But that's going to be all for this tutorial video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully that maybe cleared up some questions that you have about going about using these tools to make the best bets possible.